Drinking out of the No Drama Llama mug today. If you can see, if you're watching on the video and not just listening, you can see the llama. Is that the llama side?
Yeah, there's a llama on both
llama's
sides.
on both sides.
Yeah.
Drinking what kind of tea we got today, Bryce?
Irish breakfast.
Ooh.
Yeah. I'm out of chai.
Smells great.
Yeah. Smells like Irish.
So something we were talking about before we started recording, Bryce, is the humor that it seems the golden age of streaming is dead.
The golden age of streaming?
As in streaming is now just cable.
Oh.
They have morphed.
Yeah. We were talking about this yesterday.
Yeah, because it's, was it yesterday?
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. All the days blend in together
Yeah.
when you have children.
Yeah, eventually somebody's going to conglomerate all of the streaming services into a new service called cable.
But like when I first got married, so it's 2012, we had Netflix, and that was actually my sister's Netflix password.
Oh, wow.
And you could watch, and they had so much content because back then Netflix was the only streaming service. So they had like The Office, they had Prison Break. Did you ever watch Prison Break?
No, my brother did.
It was a really entertaining show. Prison Break, and a handful of other shows, and you could just watch. You know, there's just so much content, no ads. It was like $7 a month. Yeah. And now there's so many streaming services, and now there's so many. Like if you have to pay a premium to get no ads. You have, you got Peacock, you have HBO Max, you have Paramount Plus, you have Disney Plus, you have Netflix, you have Hulu. Yeah. And now you can subscribe to YouTube TV, you can get the NBA package. And at that point, like, if you sign up for all these streaming services, I think you're paying more than you were for cable.
We just have,
crazy.
The only one that we pay for is YouTube Premium.
I'm trying to convince Diana.
So
my
we're...
wife.
For me, I mean, so
we
AJ,
have Amazon.
So we don't have a TV in the house, and so a lot of what we do ends up being on YouTube.
Yeah.
Or Amazon Prime. It's another good one.
Yeah.
I like Amazon Prime because you can just pay for movies you want to watch.
Just like rent them. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Just rent them or buy them.
Yeah.
And then we share Netflix with my family. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's
share the passwords.
It's so crazy, man. I just don't.
Not as much content. Like Netflix, I would say, I mean, I haven't had it for years now. I think a couple years, but now it's mainly Netflix originals for the most part, and then scattered few. Yeah. Which is interesting.
I think, I mean, the reason we have Netflix is Great British Baking Show.
Is that still on there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Got a whole new season right now.
Okay.
We're headed into
I have to tell my wife she'll want to get it again because she loves that show.
Headed into the final.
Dude, how do you feel about meat pies?
I love meat pies.
Have you had a meat pie before?
Yeah.
I mean, you've been to Scotland. Do they have meat pies in Scotland?
Oh, they have meat pies in
really?
Scotland. Yeah.
I've never had a meat pie before.
Good place for a meat pie is Cresswell Bakery.
They have meat pies there? Mm-hmm. I had a roast beef sandwich there, but never had a meat pie.
Yeah, they have meat pies. Yeah.
What?
It's a good spot.
Because they always look so delicious. It's usually like a roast inside, right? Yeah. And it's like the breading on the outside. Mm-hmm. But anytime, is it called a beef Wellington? Or is that something different than
beef Wellington is different. That's a Gordon Ramsay thing.
Oh, but it's still wrapped in some type of breading, isn't it?
I don't know exactly how you make a beef Wellington, but it's a process. I had a friend who made one the other day, and she said it took her like all day to make a beef Wellington.
Yeah. I've tried to make like a fancy type of a roast beef roast, and it's challenging. Yeah. So mad respect for the Great British Baking Show, and it's always so fun to watch. It's still, was it Paul? Is he still the judge? Or
Paul Hollywood.
Paul Hollywood.
I don't know Prue's last name. Yeah,
watched it.
The hosts are great.
When the older lady was the judge, like
it's still an older lady, but it's not
the cool lady.
Dang it! Name's escaping me.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
How do you feel? Mary
Berry.
Mary Berry was her name. Yeah. I watched a couple of seasons with her, and it's super fun.
Yeah.
How do you feel about having a society that's basically built on, not society, I should say, but having an economy built on ads? I think it's highly concerning.
Yeah.
Because cable's so many ads.
Today.
Yeah, cable's so many ads.
YouTube.
And then now YouTube, I remember when YouTube had 0 ads, and you could watch whatever you want, and then it started with one. Like, you have to watch a 15-second ad that you could immediately skip over. And now they have, one, if you've used an ad blocker, you no longer can on YouTube. They don't let you watch content anymore if you have an ad blocker, which I think a lot of people with Google Chrome have ad blockers.
Yeah.
But now you have usually 2 ads before the video starts. At least one of them is unskippable. Sometimes the second one's unskippable too. And then now you have mid-roll ads. Oftentimes, like I've noticed, like if I watch like NBA highlights or like a professional sports game highlights,
mid-rolls are the worst.
So many ads.
I want to monetize my YouTube channel because I have a YouTube channel separate from this. So I feel like I have an interesting argument with ads because eventually when I can monetize my channel, hopefully in the next 6 months, I will have I'm going to turn ads on.
Yeah.
Because that's how I make money, which is what allows me to create more and better things. Yeah. Not mid-roll ads. I hate mid-rolls.
Yeah.
I think it's I mean, YouTube's entitled to do whatever they want. It's their business,
Absolutely.
Of course, But I don't know. I think it's my goal with ads is that eventually it just pushes people off platforms.
Oh, onto like websites or something like that?
Or just to nothing.
Did you see...
Just don't.
Do you ever watch Dude Perfect? Does AJ like Dude Perfect?
No.
Do you know what they are?
Yeah.
So they have a YouTube channel. They used to be huge on YouTube. I think they still have like top 10 subscribers. I think they have 50 million subscribers. Wow. They don't pull in nearly as many views as they used to. But they recently, within the last couple months, launched their own app. And they basically took their entire YouTube library of videos that they've made and they put them on their own, basically their own streaming service.
Yeah.
And so I think what's going to happen is other people are going to follow in that example. I'm really curious actually what Mr. Beast is going to do because I think once YouTube slows down, because I think that one of the reasons Dude Perfect is doing it is because their YouTube views are way down. Like they used to pull like 30, 40, 50 million views, if not more. And now they're pulling like less than 10, which is still a lot.
Still a lot.
But for them, not so much.
I feel like it's an interesting... It's a hard conversation because with YouTube, so YouTube before Google took over, YouTube used to lose money because it takes so much resource. The resource allotment to process a video, because you upload a video, then it's like video processing because it has to compress it and get it into a format that's manageable for the platform.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of processing power and that costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so which is why they have to have an ad engine to fund all of that. And so but it kind of in some ways almost create their own problems of you need more content to keep people on the platform, but the more content you have, the more content you have to process. So it's like, it's kind of a vicious cycle of.
But they're making like bazillions of dollars, right?
Oh,
they've got to be.
Of course they are. So
I mean, it's like guys like Mr. Beast. Some of his videos pull in more views than the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
I would say most of them do because I think Super Bowl is like 100 million viewers. I think is what they calculate.
Most big creators have a bigger watch base than like CNN, NBC, and Fox News combined.
That's insane.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah,
because most of
cable has died. Like it's like news outlets like Fox News in viewership. They will not last the next 2 decades.
Yeah,
because YouTube has just gotten for starters the resource required for Fox News to shoot, or CNN or NBC, whatever, doesn't have to be Fox.
So much money.
It's so much money just in people and resources and equipment. Whereas now you could get like when I do pretty much the same exact setup for YouTube, it looks amazing.
Yeah.
It looks amazing. It sounds amazing. And I didn't spend $500,000 building the studio.
Yeah.
And I don't have, 40 people required. And I totally respect what is necessary to produce things to the level that they are.
Yeah. But it's not really, it's like technology has come so far that it's obtainable by the everyday citizen, basically. So
or not, maybe not the everyday, because I mean, the studio's still
the hobbyist,
money.
I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, if you put in the time and effort, the technology is there and it's accessible if you invest the time, and you can learn on YouTube how to, set this stuff up.
Yeah,
like how to do quality video and stuff. So I mean, you could
Subscribe
probably
to my
get.
Channel. That's what I do.
You could get you could get a pretty good looking setup for probably like $10,000 or less.
Inexpensive. Yeah, I mean, what's
5 to 10 grand.
Is it Johnny Harris?
His quality is phenomenal.
I mean, he's got a team. I mean, he's. I mean, views are high. He's pulling in some revenue.
Yeah.
He's got a team that's doing the research and putting the videos together and everything. So it's not just Johnny Harris. Yeah, those I'd much rather. Or there's even a guy, it's like Mini Minutemen, I think is his YouTube handle. But he does like archaeology type stuff. And production quality is pretty low. Like for a while, he was just shooting on an iPhone. Audio wasn't great, but the content was so good. And so and he was funny, had a really engaging personality. So you'd watch it. But yeah, you're not like he's spending maybe $100 for a series that he's doing. You know, it costs him no money. But like for History Channel to come in and do
it would cost
a series
so much.
like that with the level of detail that he's going into, and he's an archaeologist, so he's younger, but he's got connections through school to be able to interview people via Zoom and stuff like that. So it's like production quality is low, production value is very high.
Yeah,
so
it's interesting because I want to say like some of these news shows, I know like CNN, Fox News, whatever, they're pulling in like. I think their top, Tucker Carlson, I believe, was the #1 news show. And I think he got 3 million views on like a Friday night or something like that. And I'm like, 3 million? I mean, that's a lot of people, but compared to YouTubers who are pulling in hundreds of millions, it's
the
insane.
thing with YouTube though too is Tucker Carlson comes on at 8 p.m. or whenever he comes on.
Yeah.
And then he's off. Whereas YouTube, you can queue up Friday night, Saturday morning, Tuesday.
You watch whenever you want.
It doesn't matter, you know. And I think that's the beauty, I think, of things like YouTube.
I also saw that the average age of a cable viewer, so someone who has a cable,
it's got to be like 65.
That's exactly what it was. How did you know? It was like, I forget where I saw it, or I read an article or something like that. But it was like, the average age is 65 to 75, and so if you're under 65, you probably don't have cable. Yeah. Or the younger you get from 65, the less likely you are to have a cable subscription.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right. The next 2 decades, I think cable will cease to exist. Or those companies will basically just switch and go full-time on YouTube, which I think a lot of them already, like they almost
the Blaze,
use their...
Which is basically Fox News.
The Blaze?
I mean, they have their own platform. It's like a subscription platform.
Yeah.
But... Yeah.
So, but
that's like Fox News, but for like
NBC, CBS, like even late night shows like SNL, Jimmy Fallon. What you've seen now is they will do their live like cable show, and then within hours it will be on YouTube.
Yeah,
and I think they're like, okay, well, like we'll still produce for cable, but they're also producing for the internet, as in for YouTube and streaming.
Yeah,
which is interesting how it's just kind of shifted. And then I guess we could tie talking about church stuff. The church has been in decline. It's almost like cable, as in a way.
I mean, average age of church is at 65.
I mean, I don't know if that's the truth. I will say, what are your thoughts on this? I saw an article. Again, I don't know if this article was correct, but they said post-COVID, millennials coming back to church in higher numbers than any other generation.
Yeah, was that a Barna thing?
I think it was Barna.
I think it was, yeah.
So more, like it was like after COVID. I mean, COVID, everyone stopped going to church. And by everyone, I mean like the vast majority, unless you worked for a church, basically, or if you went to a church that either didn't shut down, or which is the smaller number. A lot of people stopped going to church in COVID.
Yeah,
and so now that we're 3 years out almost, millennials are coming back to church at a higher rate than any other generation.
Yeah. I've been doing a lot of reflecting on the COVID times.
I feel like it's been long enough we can reflect now. So after like 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really, man, churches, I feel like just got caught in such a weird place.
Yeah. You couldn't please anybody. You made somebody mad no matter what you did.
Which I think was just, I don't know. Okay. So here's my conspiracy theory.
Okay. You can label it that.
It's not a conspiracy theory per se, but just like an interesting thought experiment was, you kind of, no matter what decision you made as a pastor or a leader during that time, you made half of your congregation mad.
For the most part.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
No matter what you did, half your people were mad at you, which is unfortunate because that's not what church is about, for starters.
Wait, was that a conspiracy theory?
No.
Okay.
Oh, we're still, no, that's just
coming.
fact.
Okay.
I think we're we're getting to the conspiracy part. Not really conspiracy theory, but just a thought experiment. Yeah, so no matter what you did, you made half your congregation mad. And in the church we were in, that was really true. I think our church erred more on the side of let's make as many people happy as possible, in a sense. And so they didn't see the effects of COVID as much. They did okay. But it was, there was always this question of changing regulations and keeping the church open or not. Mm-hmm. And looking back on it, I feel like that was just a really interesting time in the sense that it's, in a lot of ways, I feel like we misunderstood the purpose of the church. Mm-hmm. Everyone felt like, well, if the church doors close, like...
We're talking about the physical buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, that's just so... I think it really showed us what we think of church.
Oh, snap. So that's what... I remember when we went through COVID, they said... It didn't really reveal anything new. It revealed what was always there.
Yeah. Of like, the church in America is so focused on the building and Sunday.
Yeah.
And everyone panicked and we're like, well, they're taking
what are we
away.
Gonna do?
When it's like, no, like church should be happening 7 days a week. You can still do the same thing the other 6 days a week. Like, go check on your neighbors, and I think it comes down to the whole mask thing. I feel like I'm in probably the minority on the mask thing.
Sure.
Of like, I really didn't care.
Yeah.
I pretty
like
bad.
Either way.
Yeah. Like if someone wanted me to wear a mask, like, like sure, there's medical evidence that would suggest that it doesn't do as much as people would claim. But as a believer, I think of like Paul.
Yeah.
And everything that he would, do and
like he shaved his head and he's like, if you need to wear a mask, I don't care. Like that's
exactly. I'm like, look, I can here's the thing. If I don't put that mask on, you're going to have an opinion of me. You're not going to want me around you, and that's not what I want as someone who's supposed to be spreading the gospel.
Yeah.
Like if putting a mask on allows me to be around people and spread the gospel, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think we treated it very. I remember hearing a sermon once that was making a very clear distinction between what does it mean to be like a patriot, like someone who's like a Christian but like loves America, is proud of our veterans and what we did in World War II and all this stuff, of like proud to be a citizen of the United States.
Yeah.
Like just patriotism,
Proud to be an American. We don't want to get copyright strikes. So I don't want to keep going.
That's one thing, but being like a nationalist is a different thing.
Yeah. So So this is an important question. Well, actually, we'll talk about nationalism in a second, but I think this actually ties into our sermon yesterday because we talked about humility in Luke 18. And I think one of the ways that we can be humble is being aware of the flaws that we have.
Yeah.
And being able to assess those and work on them. So like,
totally,
as you said, like proud to be an American. It's like we can look at all the good things that we have done as a country.
Yeah.
But that doesn't remove all of the flaws.
Totally.
It's like no country is perfect.
Both ways. We can look at all the good things we've done and say those are some good things, and then recognize that there's some things we've done that aren't good.
Exactly.
But you can't just be like, you've done bad things and completely negate all the good things.
Exactly. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
we have to have the humility to see like, oh, like this is not okay.
Exactly.
Slavery, not okay. That was a really terrible thing that our country did.
Why did we have to explain that to anyone?
Yeah, segregation, terrible. Yeah. Like that is a horrendous thing that happened in our country. But there's also good things that our country did. World War II. Saving the world from Germany. I mean, that was a collaborative effort, I believe, with multiple countries, right?
Yeah.
But having the humility to say, hey, we understand that there's a lot of flaws.
Totally.
And we're willing to admit those flaws. So now in today's day and age, we have this question, and really this word of nationalism or nationalist has come up. Mm-hmm. And I think it's actually important that we talk about because it's a very relevant issue that I think the church is in a lot of places wrestling with or trying to define.
Yeah.
So let's just kind of toss it out there. How would you define nationalist? I can go first. I think my view of what we would think of a quote Christian nationalist is someone that believes that United States of America is the savior of the world.
Yeah, dude, the new Israel.
Yeah. Yeah, like we're here.
Yeah.
We're the best country. No country is like us.
Yeah.
And some people like spit out economical facts. And I was actually on a Preston Sprinkle podcast. It was like, hey, like we are the richest nation in human history. Or you could make the argument that we are the richest nation in human history. Mm-hmm. Is that necessarily a good thing?
Yeah.
As the view of coming from a Christian.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could say it's good nor bad.
Yeah.
But I think you could say there are a lot of temptations. Yeah, it just is. But like that comes with its own challenges.
Yeah.
I think you can start looking like the church in Corinth, worshiping wealth and money and finances and the false gods. Church in Ephesus. I mean,
worshiping other things.
yeah, that too.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my view. My view is the Christian nationalist says that America is the Holy Land, like the chosen ones.
Yeah.
Which is not even in Revelation.
And I think
America's not.
I would say to add to that, I would say that like, I think when you take that like God bless America to the extreme.
Do you want me to sing that song too?
No. Well, I in the sense that that like you're like an attack on democracy is an attack on the church. And there's you know, like I'm super stoked that we have a separation of church and state, and I think we should keep it that way. You know, in the sense that, I think a lot of Christian nationalists try and blend church and politics of like I think abortion is a really challenging argument. And like I remember growing up in California, and I was probably in middle school or high school when they were trying to pass the ban on gay marriage, and which passed.
What was that? 2015? Yeah, sounds right. 15?
No.
2014?
No. It was like 2010.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because we moved here in 2012.
No. It wasn't 2010.
Yeah.
It was like 2011, maybe.
Maybe 2011. We moved
in
here
California.
In
so
California.
I was thinking about Obama.
No.
Oh, you're talking about California.
California.
Yeah, you're right.
It would have been like 2010, I think.
Right.
Prop 11, I think. I don't remember. I can picture the sign in my head, though. There's so many of them. And yeah, California banned gay marriage. And I think like from a constitutional standpoint, I don't understand why we would ban gay marriage. That doesn't make any sense, which is why it was repealed later. But and as a Christian, I totally agree that like that's what is God's design for marriage? It's between one man and one woman.
Yeah.
But as like just reading the Constitution, you're like, I don't know, man. I feel like how this is set up, I feel like it could really go either way. You know?
It's interesting. I think part of it is the Christian viewpoint really pushed back because it's really America's pushback to Christian principles, I guess. And so it's like based in anxiety of like, oh, like what if the Christian view is no longer the prominent view in the United States?
Yeah.
What would that mean for my life? And I was listening to a podcast on my way here in my 2-minute drive on my way here. And they were saying, it's a friend of mine, and he said on the podcast that when he was a kid growing up, he grew up in North Louisiana in a small town. They had a math teacher that came to town. I believe it was like 9th grade. I could be wrong. But he said they had a math teacher that moved to town, got a job, and she got fired. And he said she was a phenomenal math teacher, but she got fired because within the first year, she didn't get plugged in with a local church.
Whoa.
That's the reason they fired her.
That's crazy.
And so that was in our country. That's probably like the 60s or probably the 60s in there. So
something just happened in Tennessee where, oh man, I decided to do no laptop today and now I'm regretting it. Something happened in Tennessee recently where a high school senior was partying at like a school party and had like a crop top on or something. It was something weird where, the principal was like, this doesn't align with our Christian values. Yeah. And they like stripped her scholarships.
Because you wore a crop top?
Yeah. It was
That's like the battle on yoga pants. Do you remember that? That still happens.
I do remember that, yeah. So it was something crazy like that.
This is good conversation. We'll bring that back. But yeah.
And he ended up taking administrative leave. They got our scholarships reinstated. But it was just like, what are you doing? Like so many of us, I think, have seen this firsthand, where we talked about this last week, I think, of these are like non-salvational issues that we make salvational issues, and then like it turns people off to the church. And there's definitely a point where you have to there are hills to die on, you know? But I think there's some of these where we just like, we make it a hill to die on when it's like, well, no. And now like you could have handled this more gently, and now you've pushed this person away. And now, like, they're totally turned off to the gospel because of how you acted.
Yeah.
You know? And it's stuff like that where you're just like, ugh, like.
So that's, I think that, man, we're talking about a lot of, I didn't know we were talking about controversial things this morning. I
don't know. I've been thinking through a lot of stuff lately.
And so that would be, I think as a society, I'll rewind that. As a church culture in the 90s, there's what's called the purity culture. I think we've kind of reflected on that a little bit on the podcast. And I think the whole thing of like the crop top type of a deal, or I mean, when I was in youth group, girls couldn't wear bikinis. It was like, no, you know, stuff like that on trips and stuff. And I mean, I'm not saying either which one was right or wrong, but I think what we have done as a Christian culture, as someone who grew up in the 90s in the church culture, is we objectified women and their bodies.
Yeah.
As in like women are a temptation. They are, you know, something to watch out for, you know, and viewing women as objects instead of teaching men to view women as made in the image of God.
Yeah.
You know, and the reason we walk away from temptation is not because women are tempting necessarily. It's more of, hey, like we view women as made in the image of God, just like men. They're not objects. They are people.
Yeah.
Loved by God, made by God.
Right.
And we are to respect and honor the image of God within them.
Yeah.
And that should allow us to abstain, hopefully, from acting on said temptations, because it's not, you know, there's the Every Young Man's Battle type of books. I don't know if you ever, did you ever read those? No. My mom gave them to me. I don't think I ever read them, but there's different things. It's like, there's just so much shaming in it.
Yeah.
Like you're looking at a woman, you're like, you think she's beautiful and whatever. And you know, there was even one like there's a suggestion that I remember as a kid or middle schooler, maybe early high school, you would put a rubber band around your wrist.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you heard of this?
I've heard of this. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you,
I just ended up playing with it all day.
And then if you have like, if you're tempted and you pull the rubber band, snap it on your hand, so then you associate pain. I'm like, I'm not a psychologist, but I feel like that's
bad.
It doesn't teach to honor the image of God within. It's more of like this is bad, and you're bad for thinking these thoughts, you know, whatever.
Yeah. I think
instead of my whole point is I think it's a healthier way to teach men and young men to view women as obviously made in the image of God, loved by God.
Yeah.
To not view women as objects that are like, you know, like a video game, you have to like, but to see them as made in the image of God.
But the problem, I totally agree. You know, I think we need to teach our kids to view women as beautiful and not as a temptation.
Yeah,
I think that's it puts both men and women at just such a huge disadvantage when you start dating and doing stuff. And then now we have, man, we are all over the place today.
That's what I'm saying.
But now, like, you look at OnlyFans, where it's like, it's
the same thing. You're objectifying women.
It's such a hard, but they would say like, no, we have the power because we're the ones making money. Because, you know, in Western society, we just associate money with power.
Well, that's an interesting conversation.
And so someone's like, well, I'm putting pictures of my body online. You're paying for it, and I'm making money because of my body. Therefore, I have the power, which I view it as a man who doesn't watch OnlyFans. I view it as like, you have no power. Like anyone, because here's the thing: you shut down your OnlyFans account, someone just goes to another creator.
Yeah.
You know, that's all they do.
Because they're not following you for you.
They're not following you for you. They're like, maybe they follow you for like, oh, like I like, you know, brunettes or whatever. And so they found you and ta-da. But you shut down your OnlyFans account and they're like, oh, just go find another brunette, you know? And so it's just so, it's so strange to me that an OnlyFans creator views that as like, well, we're taking the power back. Whereas I'm like, I feel like you can basically window shop for whatever pleasure you want on something like OnlyFans. You're like, what type of stuff does this person do? Like, oh, you know, to me, it's like it's taking objectification to a whole new level.
It's like a vending machine of women.
Yes, and I'm like,
or men, or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, but
whoever. And I just think it's terrible. Like, I'm like, I don't think you understand what
it's it's like the principles behind it. You know. And that it actually made me think of this Wednesday or tomorrow, say Monday. We're recording this on Monday. Tuesday this week, a video game trailer is dropping. Have you seen this?
No.
There's been articles about it, whatever. It's supposed to be one of the largest video game releases of all time.
Oh, is it GTA 6?
It is Grand Theft Auto 6.
Oh, Lord.
So, Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, I saw something on Reddit about it.
It is the most... No. I believe I could be 100% wrong, but I believe it's one of the highest grossing games in human history.
It has to be. It's got to be up there with like World of Warcraft.
Yeah,
and
Grand Theft Auto 5 has been out for a decade, and I think it's the most purchased game ever.
Yeah.
Now, if you play Grand Theft Auto or not, no judgment, I guess. I put the I guess in there. But
you can play Grand Theft Auto without partaking in Grand Theft Auto.
Well, I mean, it's the principle. Like, what's behind it? The point of the game. I mean, there's like missions and stuff. I played Grand Theft Auto 3 when I was in high school. My mom made me throw it away eventually, but on the Xbox.
We need to put like a explicit content warning on this one.
Yeah, lots of conversation.
Yeah,
but it's like, what is that teaching? Like, why is the trade like people? It's going to get millions and millions of views when that game comes out. It's it's very highly anticipated. People are on like waiting on the edge of their seats for this game to drop.
Yeah,
and I'm like, typically what's the famous thing with Grand Theft Auto is like there's strip clubs you can go into.
You can throw prostitutes off a bridge. And,
you can do that.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want in Grand Theft Auto.
That's what you can do. You can murder people. You can just go and shoot people. You can, and I'm like,
you can drive through crowds of people.
Yeah. Like why do we want this?
It is 100% like lawlessness.
Yeah, that's what Grand Theft Auto. It's lawlessness.
Yeah,
it's like. And now with like virtual reality coming out eventually and stuff, I'm like, this is going to get worse.
It's just, oh man.
But I'm like, what is that teaching? You know, and I'm like, if you're an adult, that's one thing. But like, if you're a teenager playing GTA 6 and
putting that.
I guess I was there playing GTA 3. But I feel like it's just getting worse.
It's getting worse.
It's getting worse. It's getting more realistic.
I can't even imagine what's going to be in GTA 6.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so like, it's sad to see, as a follower of Jesus, the decline of society in the United States. Now, there's, again, you can't say that's a hyperbolic statement because there's some good things that are happening. Yeah. There are church communities that are growing. There are people that are being saved. There are people doing good things. And
I think we're talking specifically about the United States because everywhere else, church is growing.
That's all that we know.
Yeah.
We've seen all the stats that there are more Christians, professing Christians in Africa than there are people in the United States. Brazil and China, I believe Christianity is growing by leaps and bounds. I think I read an article by 2050, there's going to be 3.3 billion Christians on this planet, which is incredible.
Was it last week we were talking about like, is it Nigeria that sends out more Christian missionaries than we send in?
And that's...
We just have this like this view in our mind.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Of like, we just have this view in our mind of like, oh, we need to send missionaries to Africa. When you're like, no. They need to send missionaries here. You know
what's interesting? Because as a kid, I don't know if this has changed in the last 30 years, but I remember like when we were like sending missionaries to Tanzania or Africa or something, like, wow. But then as I've gotten older, I'm like, oh. And I have a friend. We have a friend at our church. He is from Kenya, And I was talking with him. He's like, yeah, my cousin's a pastor and there's churches everywhere there. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Are you serious? He's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's a Christian nation. I mean, they proclaim, and I have a friend, you've been to Uganda, and some would say, kind of like United States, there's some people that would say they're Christians, but they don't live it out in principle. I'm like, same here.
There's churches everywhere in Uganda. Yeah.
Yeah, churches everywhere, and there was I watched a John Christ video. He went to Honduras, and there's mission trips to Honduras and stuff, which is awesome. Like, I'm not saying these things are bad, but I didn't know this. He went to a giant mega church in Honduras.
Yeah.
Like, thousands and
We
thousands.
act like, they need us.
Yeah.
You know?
It's just so interesting to see. And then by 2050, Christians in the United States will represent, I think, like 10% of worldwide Christianity.
Yeah.
That's incredible to think about.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's funny too. I mean, just going back to the whole Christian nationalist and society thing. When we were in Uganda, they were just passing some legislation banning gay marriage and some other stuff. I don't remember.
In Uganda, they did?
I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was in. So my buddy and I were having this conversation with our translator there, and we were talking about it, and it was just abortion's illegal there. Can't do abortions. Obviously, they still likely happen, but we were talking about at least in America, I have a big problem with how the church does anti-abortion stuff in America, because I think it's
shame-driven.
Yeah, I think it's really shame-driven for starters, and I just don't. I just don't think it's effective. How we do it.
I mean, this is a very sensitive conversation. I mean, we're talking about so many things this morning.
I'm willing to stir the pot on this one.
Yeah. The abortion conversation, I think, without a doubt, you can look biblically speaking and say that human life begins at conception.
Totally. Yeah.
I think there's no argument in that.
I want to put a pin in that. I want to come back to something on that.
Okay.
Just FYI.
I don't think there's an argument in that. Maybe there. I don't think there's.
Not an argument against it. I just have I learned something recently that.
And so my question is, what is the best way to make it be a place where people want to have their children?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then there are, I don't know the accurate number, but there are many women who have had abortions. And once you have an abortion, obviously you can't do it. You can't go back. And so there's a lot of shame. And I think it's the grace of Jesus and the love of God is enough. You know what I mean? Because from what I've read, I'm not a female, but if females who have had abortions, there is a grief and a resentment that follows you.
Yeah. I think
from what I've heard, again, I do
especially
not know
later
my experience.
term.
I'm a male. I've never, been there. But and so I think the conversation begins with the grace and the love of God, and then on a society level, I think Rick Warren famously says he's like, I'm whole life, as in like he wants the babies to be born,
cradle to grave,
but he also wants a safe place for moms who think they can have their kids in a safe place. You know? And what's interesting, even in this society today, even people who are choosing not to have kids, one of the reasons what I have heard is they have said, I don't want to bring a kid into this messed up place. Yeah. Which is really sad to me.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Oh boy.
We're only 40 minutes in.
Yeah, we got some time. Yeah, I mean, I feel like abortions anyway, so back to the Uganda thing really quick. I think that's all. I agree, and I'm going to touch on some of that stuff in a second. But the Uganda thing, the country just has such a high value on human life, and they have such a high value on the family unit. Not just, I think the Greeks, what we would see in like the Old Testament is like the paterfamilia. It's like the family unit of like you have, maybe a husband and wife, but then there's like the grandparents and the cousins and the brothers and and it's a unit of, and it's not just like me and Brooke and AJ. It's a whole family system that lives together and works together, and we just don't have they just have such a high value on unity and family and on growing their family, and so that's why they have and that's why things like gay marriage just as a society doesn't fit into that, and abortion and all, it just doesn't fit into their view of family. So even and I saw it because I think with us, like, grandparents, mom and dad get old, you put them in a nursing home and you let somebody else take care of it.
Yeah, they don't do that there. We talked about this. Our friend at church who's from Kenya, he said a lot of Kenyans come to the United States and they get into assisted living care because there's like, this is what we do anyways.
Exactly.
Like, it's not work.
Yeah.
This is just what we do. It's who we are as a people.
And I think,
which is pretty incredible.
Going back to, kind of what you were saying with just some of the abortion stuff and being whole life and whatnot. I think a big problem with how the church fights against abortion in America is we don't have any grace at all. We go like protest in front of Planned Parenthood, and you're like, excuse me, when did Jesus protest? And they would say like, he went and flipped the tables in the temple court and whatever. And I'm like, I think you're missing the point here. Like, in what you're doing, you're not leading anyone to Jesus. First of all, I think you're taking that situation out of context. Second of all, you're not leading anyone to Jesus. And I mean, and I think how many of you, if one of those women walked up to you and said, "I will keep my baby and carry it to term if you take it, because I don't have the money or the means or like I was raped or whatever." Fine, you're right. I don't want this. I don't want to abort this pregnancy, but I can't keep this baby. How many people that are protesting in front of Planned Parenthood would take that baby? I think it's the vast minority would take them up on that. And
I would assume so, but I would be curious, like, if anyone would ever do a study on the effectiveness of the protest in front of Planned Parenthood. Because I would assume, we are just kind of blowing smoke, like we don't know, but I would assume they're not very effective.
Yeah.
But what I do see is, like in Salem, at least we have a Hope Pregnancy Clinic.
Yeah.
And all the stats I see coming out of there are very positive.
Oh, totally.
Like, women who come in there who are afraid of having a baby, they have counselors, they walk them through.
They have real nurses.
Nurses. And a support system. Yeah. And so instead of shaming, it's a support-driven thing.
Yeah.
Which I think...
Free?
I believe it is free.
Yeah.
And so that, to me, is more effective than you're a terrible person.
Yeah.
If the stats proved otherwise, I would listen, or I would be curious about it. But I don't think the stats prove otherwise.
I don't think the stats prove otherwise.
But I think I will say on this kind of level, the country is becoming much more hostile.
Yeah.
And I've talked about this before, but the anxiety in our country as a whole is just continuously rising.
Yeah.
The reason I say that is because I don't know the context of the situation, but there was a street preacher in, did you see this? I want to say Texas, no, Arizona maybe.
Okay.
He was preaching on the street with like a megaphone. I don't know what he was saying.
Yeah.
Probably, you're all going to hell type of a deal. But I mean, that's happened for decades. Forever. So he's out there and someone shoots him in the face. He got shot in the face and he's in the hospital. I'm like, that is awful.
Yeah.
And just to see, like, in our country, that is where things are right now.
Well, I think
you can't just disagree with something like, hey man, like I don't think that what you're saying is
gotta shoot him in the face.
Yeah, that's like that's the answer.
Okay, two things. One,
terrible.
I don't want to bring up gun legislation.
We've had too many controversial things.
So this happened last week before. Someone was fired from a bank, and they were like, "I'm going to show them." It was someone who was left leaning, very anti-gun. They were like, "I'm going to show people how easy it is to go buy guns and shoot up a place." Person went and bought like an AR-15 or something and went and shot up the bank that he just got fired from.
Oh my gosh!
And you're like, that's not the point. The point isn't that you can buy guns. The point is that there are evil people like you. Anyways, so you have situations like that. But then the flip side of the coin is you have people like Sean Foyt, who's like, I'm going to go stir the pot up and pour. Did you hear? This was like maybe 2020. Oh, he went and did a worship thing.
Yes.
And they took all of his sound equipment and threw it in the river.
The Portlandians did?
Yeah. And you're just like, I almost swore. No duh, Like, and I think like you went up there knowing that was the outcome. You know, like you went up there to
like he
stir
wanted
the
the
pot.
spotlight on him.
Yeah,
type of a deal.
And I'm just like, that's not what Jesus did. You know, that's not like he went into places that were controversial, and he was there with love. You know, and so to like do something like that, knowing what's going to happen just to get your face on the front page, it's like no, that's not.
I think
not the thing.
I think the beautiful thing about Jesus, and we've talked about anxiety, I think Jesus always speaks, maybe we shouldn't say always, but Jesus speaks to people's anxieties. Mm-hmm. So he would go into tense situations, and he wouldn't do it purposely to stir the pot necessarily. He would typically bring people's anxiety down. Or he would be direct most of the time with the religious people.
Yeah.
And say, like, this is not okay. Like, you know the truth, and and you're not following it, or you're living your life and you're checking off all the boxes when this is not okay. And so he's direct. And so when we say that, at least in my mind, when Jesus comes and he acts in love, that's not just like the Beatles song, "All You Need Is Love," as in like rainbows and gumdrops. Sometimes that means Jesus is very direct. But he never loses himself. So he goes to those tense situations and he speaks the principles in which he believes in, but he never compromises truth. And most of the time that brings people's anxiety down. So like when he confronts the lady, the sinner at the well, he's not just like, "Oh, God is love," all this thing. He speaks to who she is, her flaws, but also the grace and the forgiveness of God.
Yeah. Well, and I think,
and she go and sin no more. You're forgiven.
And
I mean, I'm just kind of, I don't know if it's a direct quote, but
yeah. Well, I think you look at Jesus and you look at the New Testament, and how often, when Jesus is preaching to the masses, how often is he rebuking, versus when he's in those one-on-one scenarios. Like Jesus never stands up and rebukes an entire crowd. Like he has those conversations one-on-one with people, and
unless it's the religious people,
and then he's a little different.
Or demons.
Yeah. But when even the demons though, like he has a conversation with them, like he's talking to them, he's not just like getting up and putting people, he's not getting up on a stage and putting people like, I
see what you're saying. Like he's with them. He's not putting himself on a pedestal.
Exactly. Like he's with them having this. He's not on a stage like, saying, like be the resistance.
Exactly right. And that's my point. Jesus is able to speak his principles while being connected to people.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before. We call this emotional differentiation, where you have the ability to stay connected to people that you vastly disagree with.
Yeah. Somebody asked me this last week. It was a bid for a job type thing, and they're asking, so a lot of these times, you put people in front of a camera, and maybe you disagree with their views. If you're interviewing, like a rancher who has views on ranching that you don't agree with, or someone with different political views. And I think that's the thing is like you have to, like we're talking about with women, is like you have to remember that every single human is created in the image of God, even the liberals and the Christian nationalists and the only people who have OnlyFans accounts and people who watch OnlyFans accounts. Every single person is created in the image of God, and you have to start with that as your baseline. And we're all sinners. We have these little memory verse things for AJ, and so he just did Ephesians 4:32, and now he's doing John 3:16.
Nice.
And you're like, it's so, I think John 3:16 is such a funny verse because everyone remembers, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And we forget that like the Son of God died for every single one of us, not just the elite, not just the rich, like every single one of us needed a savior to die on the cross for us, and I think that's just such a, when you have that frame of mind, like imagine walking around as Jesus, talking to these people and be like, I'm going to die for you, and I'm going to die for you, and you. And, he's like walking around his whole life with this knowledge.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just so, it baffles me how we treat people.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
and I think that the challenging thing is I mean, and tying back into like the protest of Planned Parenthood. So I think the difference between how Jesus would respond and how that takes effect is Jesus, I think, would be there, and he might say like, "Hey, like, don't do this. Like, this is not going to be what you think it's going to be. Like, you will have the strength to make it through. Like, foster, adopt, whatever. Like, this is But the difference is now the protest is them just shouting.
Yeah,
there's no
Substance.
relationship. There's no substance to it.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying it's I think there's power in even having those conversations, being like, hey, like, don't go in there. But that's not what people are doing. Maybe there's a group that's like standing outside and being like, and there's other things. There's like the life chains, those type of stuff. I'm not sure.
Even foster care, like the foster system needs more foster parents.
Yeah.
There's
a variety of ways.
Parents.
But I kind of think in reflection, and kind of one of the reasons why I want to start this podcast, why we talked about it, because talking about these things, like even for me as a pastor, makes me really nervous.
Yeah.
Because it's like you put yourself out there. We're not saying that we're right.
Yeah.
We're not saying we might misquote something. But I think kind of going back to, we went to a pastor conference a couple months ago, and there's one of the pastors, he's a professor at Bushnell, AJ Swobode, said, if I could go back in time, one of the things I would change is I would talk about more controversial things earlier.
Yeah.
And I was doing some research.
Let's do it.
It's more of like, if we don't talk about it, who is? And so I'm not saying we're right, but I'm saying we want to, and I want to be willing as a ministry leader to provide a platform for conversation.
Yeah.
And if people see the world differently than me, I want to hear where they're at.
Yeah.
I want to hear their thoughts on political things. Because in my mind, the church should be the best place to have controversial conversations.
Yeah.
Because it's coming from a place of love. Instead of, like, oh, you believe this, I don't like you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I guess there's
Yeah.
you want to build a safe space for people to have those conversations.
I agree. And I think we need to do a better job at that as a church as a whole. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the podcast is I think it's a loud truck. I think it's an opportunity for
Garage studio.
Yeah. I think it's an opportunity for us to come and just, like we were talking about humility on Sunday.
Yeah.
Is to be, like we don't have all the answers to these questions, but I think we're supposed to work out our faith with fear and trembling. And I think there's a lot of people that they weren't taught how to, and they didn't get the chance to really work out their faith, and so they grew up in maybe a hyper-conservative home or a hyper-charismatic home, and they never got the chance to understand, like, what is the foundation of their faith. And so then you're presented with these issues like abortion. And I think abortion is wrong. However, I think when you talk about women who've been raped or when the pregnancy, risks the life of the mother, I think those are situations that need a little bit more conversation than just abortion is wrong, because we have tended to, as a church, not look at the situation as a whole and remember that, like, there are so many human lives here, of people, the mother who's created in the image of God, this baby who's created in the image of God, and this family and the person that impregnated said mother, like all of these things that, like, we're just like, abortion is wrong. And we don't take the time to have this nuanced conversation. And that's like when people ask me questions about like stuff in the homeless community. It's like, legislation is great. Like it can help in a lot of ways and allocate funds and keep people from doing things they shouldn't be doing and putting punishments in place for when you're doing things that you really shouldn't be doing or that hurt you or other people. But you really have to step down to the individual level to really figure out solutions to problems. And I think abortion is the same way of like, you're pregnant, but what has the last year of your life looked like, and how can we meet you where you're at, and how can we create some solutions and lead you to Jesus?
I think that the whole conversation is a relational one.
Yeah.
Because like it's a conversation. And because you can say those statements like, this is wrong, whatever you choose.
Yeah.
Abortion is wrong. This is wrong. But and you have the freedom to be able to do that. But I think what we're saying is, if we want to really build relationships with people, that is a fairly ineffective way.
Yeah.
Like, you can state the truth, sure, but is that going to help build a relationship with people? And then hopefully lead them to the love and the grace of Jesus, and having compassion and love, and But again, we're not saying you can't speak what you believe. I think it's more of. I think Jesus was very relational. I think Paul was relational.
Well, and I don't think it's about speaking what you believe. I don't think that's what we should be doing. I think we should be speaking what is true.
Yeah. That's probably accurate.
Because there's a lot of people. Because I think here's the number one issue with the abortion thing is that abortion, for starters, is not the greatest sin. Mm-hmm. Sin is sin. Mm-hmm.
You don't think there's different level? I mean, I'm not saying.
No.
So, I think what we're saying is all sin separates us from God.
Yeah.
But there is a difference between. I'm just saying in general. Like, if you murder someone in anger.
Yeah.
Versus lying. And that's a whole nother episode. But I was just throwing it out there. So all sin separates us from God. Yes, but murdering someone in rage, like whatever, versus lying to your parents as an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
What say you?
I think James has a good answer to that.
Bible verse. Let's do this.
Hang on, let me find it.
He's looking.
Talks about love. You can keep talking if you want while I look for this. I mean, it might take me a minute to find it, because I don't think I have it underlined yet. I think too, like Jesus says in Sermon on the Mount. I think if you've harbored anger against your brother in your heart, if you harbor anger against your brother, you have murdered them in your heart. Mm. You're like, well, what do you do with that? Like if you're standing there screaming at people on the street corner in front of Planned Parenthood, like who's the real sinner here? Who's the Pharisee in this scenario?
Yeah, I see.
Keep going. I'm going to find this.
Well, I was just saying, I don't have any theological argument to it. All I'm saying is I think that every single sin separates us from God. As in, we have all separated ourselves from the love of God. We talked about it yesterday. Romans 3, I believe it says, none is righteous, no, not one. And Jesus' love and his grace is enough for everyone. Mm-hmm. I think that's what I'm getting at.
Dang, where? I thought this was.
Sorry, I guess what I'm saying is if you murdered someone, and if you told a lie, both would require forgiveness.
Yeah.
And Jesus' love is enough.
Oh, totally.
But I would say either one. There are worse consequences for murder than there is for lying.
Oh, totally.
I guess that's where
the consequences. I think for different. I think
so. More severe consequences would mean that it's worse, though.
But no. It's we're talking about earthly consequences.
Yes,
we're not talking about eternal consequences.
Yes.
I could care less about earthly consequences.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the main thing here is eternal consequences.
Yeah. The eternal consequences are, I would say,
like think about that verse in Matthew of did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not drive out demons in your name? He's
Jesus said, I never knew you.
Away from me, I never knew you.
Yes,
they didn't murder or steal or
yeah.
But they still are eternally separated from their Savior.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah.
So I think sure, even in the Torah, the laws for doing certain things, there's different levels to different punishments.
Yeah.
You commit adultery, you get stoned. You boil a goat in its mother's milk and you get a slap on the wrist. I don't know. But all of these things require atonement.
Yes.
And I think that's the key thing here that I think we have to remember is that all sin separates us.
Correct.
And so no matter what sin you are committing, it is an act that separates you from God.
Yeah.
And so Yeah, I think we have this like this expectation that like, oh, well, murder of course is worse than lying. You know, and in a sense, the consequences or the direct in a lot of situations, the consequences or the fallout of murder would be greater than lying in most situations.
Yeah.
But I would say the key
Unless
issue,
your lying leads to murder.
Exactly. Well, but that's the thing though, is that, lying can lead to murder, or lust can lead to lying, can lead to murder. And like all of the,
Sure.
And so I think the point that we have to remember is that, it's sin is what I swear
We all
was
need
in
repentance.
James, yeah.
That is the
Where
truth.
James talked about that, where even if you, I think it's in James. I just can't.
Shout it out. Let me see. Maybe we'll figure it out.
It's where it's like if you follow all of the law, but you break one piece, you're still a lawbreaker.
Yes. Man, and now it's gonna bother me where it is.
Or is that in Jude? It's in James, I think. Man, of all
I don't know.
of
But
all
yeah,
the
no,
days
it's
for
true.
me to decide not to
Bring the laptop.
Bring
No,
the
it's
laptop
It's true
out.
though. Without a doubt, I think that's what I was meaning is earthly consequences. Yeah. I mean, we're an hour in, but I will say I did a sermon a while ago. I forget what passage it was on, but it talked about rewards in heaven. What are your views? What are your thoughts? I guess we could kind of close with this kind of thought. What are your thoughts on? Because I don't think there's going to be different levels of heaven, obviously. I don't think there's going to be any jealousy or ever stuff like that. But I do think there will be some sort of like different type of rewards, because I think Scripture teaches about that.
Yeah.
And one example that I used when I talked about that sermon I thought about, it was about mowing a lawn, as funny as that is. When we go to heaven, the good things that you have done for God and what there's different satisfaction levels when you, like, if you mow a 10 by 10 foot lawn, you're like, oh, like you still feel good about that.
Nice.
But if you mow a giant field,
Yeah.
the satisfaction is different.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the reward kind of in heaven is going to be that type of way.
Yeah.
Where you will have a higher level of satisfaction and a level of accomplishment, I guess.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I've just kind of
Yeah.
thought about that before. I mean, I don't know. I'm just a human.
Yeah.
And I think that's only for God to decide to know. But
I don't know, man.
it's interesting to think about. But I was thinking about that as in, like, decisions we make on earth. I think it does affect, obviously, the eternity for
Yeah.
in ways.
Yeah.
But obviously, the grace and the mercy of Jesus is not. I'm kind of like thinking off the top of my head right now, but not really making much sense.
I think that, I know what you mean. I think it's a really tough conversation for some Christians to have of, like, someone who gives their life to Jesus on their deathbed. And they're like a Nazi or a murderer or an adulterer or someone who's got so much sin to atone for and apologize for or whatever on earth. And they just have this moment of humility on their deathbed where they meet Jesus. And you're like, what the heck? That guy lived this crazy life.
Yeah.
And he gets to repent on his deathbed, and I've got to walk with Jesus my whole life. And
I guess it goes. Sorry, I don't cut you off.
No, you're good. And I think we just really struggle with those things of realizing. I think that's really hard for us, especially us Westerners, of like getting what we deserve. And I think there's a parable for that.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to reference the parable of where the owner's like, hey,
Everyone
I'll pay
gets paid the
you
same.
$20 for the day, and the guy works all day for $20. So then at the end of the day, he pays for someone for like an hour of work and pays him the same.
Yeah.
And then the first guy's like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And the owner's like, well, who's you to say?
Yeah.
Like,
And
this is what we agreed upon.
I think the importance of that is to remember that the point of eternity with God is eternity with God. Full stop. Why do you need anything else? You have the highest reward possible is eternity with the creator of the universe.
Yeah.
So if that's what we're all striving for, what does it matter if you get eternity with God in 4K and they get it in 1080p or whatever. Or whatever. I found the verse in James, by the way.
What is it?
James chapter 2, verse 8. If you really keep the royal law found in Scripture, love your neighbor as yourself, you are doing right. But if you show favoritism, you sin and are convicted by the law as lawbreakers. For whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking all of it. For he who said, you shall not commit adultery, also said, you shall not murder. If you do not commit adultery, but do commit murder, you have become a lawbreaker. Yeah. Anyways.
Nice.
Did it without the laptop.
From the top of the dome.
Yeah.
Nice.
Anyways.
Yeah, who knew we were going to talk about, we talked about in the sermon yesterday, humility and trying to, figure out our flaws. And I think, again, part of this podcast is just kind of throwing our thoughts out there and trying to wrestle with these things.
Yeah.
Toss them out. Or we kind of wrestle with them. And
yeah. I think it's good. I mean, if someone came along and said you're wrong and wanted to have a conversation about it, that's what the point of this is.
Sure, I'm more than open to hear that.
Yeah,
because I think we're all just trying to navigate this together and figure it out. But again, I'm just passionate about having these types of conversations because if we don't, someone else will.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. If it's not a biblical, I'm not saying we're like scholars by any means. I'm a local church pastor, and we're just trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
So we want to provide the place where we can just have these open conversations.
Totally.
Where, again, sometimes it's not possible to talk about on a Sunday morning service.
Dude, we got to do a live episode.
We will.
I think it'd be super fun.
We will.
Yeah. That's pretty good. Hour and 6 minutes.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Only an hour, 6 minutes for Stevie, so he made it. That first episode, he still tells me, he's like, Steven, it took so long. He doesn't still tell me, but he told me it took so long to listen to it because he listened to it and then he went to watch the video that we linked, the 3 miles an hour video.
Oh,
he watched that and
which
then he
is
came
30
back. So
minutes.
the whole thing, he's like, took me 2.5 hours.
Oh man, I listen to Joe Rogan, so
that's like 3 hour long episodes.
I love it.
But I still get feedback that people listen to stuff all the time. So I know Hillary from church, Derek listens. Cheryl listens. Who else? Rich listens.
Tony came up to me yesterday.
Tony listens?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's why we want to provide a place for people to.
Yeah. Also,
that's why I do it for our church people.
Some people have asked if we're going to put episodes on Spotify.
Or just like a podcast platform.
Yeah. I mean, if we put them on Spotify, it can go to Google and Apple from there.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about it. We're
going to have a meeting after this.
Yeah. The main reason we would say no is because one of the goals of the podcast, other than providing a service for you all, is that if we are able to monetize the church's YouTube channel, all of that ad revenue goes right back into the community, to the Union Gospel Mission.
Yeah.
And so while we would love to have you all listen on whatever platform you choose, we don't want that. We want you to listen on YouTube so that your listening can help support local ministries like the Union Gospel Mission. However, if we know some people have shared with us that like they don't have unlimited data, so they can only listen at home, and it'd be nice to be able to download on Spotify or whatever. So we're open to having that conversation.
We might just do it delayed, maybe, or something.
Maybe delayed. Yeah, like we could start releasing old ones now.
Yeah.
Could help build some traction to get more people listening here.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you guys for bringing those issues to our attention. We'll have a conversation about them and let you guys know. But
Thanks,
thank you.
everybody.
Thanks for tuning in. And I mean, I just have such a fun time with these and coming in and having these conversations. And
totally.
Hopefully you guys find some benefit in it. People continue to watch, so I'm going to assume that you do. Well, guys, if you live in the PNW, it's the Pacific Northwest right now. Stay dry.
Dude, so much rain. An inch of rain today.
Yeah.
On Monday, so by Wednesday when you're listening.
Crazy. Yeah, so hopefully you guys didn't float away.
Have fun, guys.
See ya.
Thank you.